I had a ticket to chaos as Wolves take on the Pelicans in game 82 of the regular season and get the most Timberwolves win possible in that one at home. Just a wild game, something that had everything going on. There was punches thrown at teammates, punches thrown at the wall, and nonsensical happenings through it all. It was Superior Appreciation Day on this Easter Sunday in a Primlo game here in Minneapolis. I decided to go just because it was a $10 ticket thing. I'm like, I'm not going to spend more than that in a game that's likely going to make me frustrated, and it absolutely did, although we got the win in the end, and you're like happy about that, but in Wolves fashion, there has to be a slight to every bit of joy you could possibly have, which let's start out with some of those happenings. First quarter, the Timberwolves do not show up defensively at all. They are getting burned in transition, burned on offensive rebounding. They would get out-rebounded by 10 in the first quarter, which is outrageous. A lot of that can go on the back of Rudy Gobert, who was terrible in his minutes, and he would end up taking out some of his frustration, throwing a punch at Kyle Anderson, and being sent home for the rest of the game. Timberwolves were also missing so many wide open shots in that first quarter. Anthony Edwards, you could tell his jumper was not on, and that would continue through the rest of the game. And their defense, specifically on Brandon Ingram, was not good. He gets off to a blistering start, outscores the Timberwolves in the first quarter. He has 21, Wolves have 18, Pelicans have 30 after one. Another look you saw frequently in that first quarter is Karl Anthony Towns getting the ball in isolation on the wings, which is a spot where he is always going to get double teamed, but Cat does not handle double teams quickly. It's about 3 seconds before he ever makes a play out of them, and half the time it's a turnover. We ran that action probably 12 times today, and probably one positive outcome the entire time, which was a reach-in foul call that was kind of a bailout. But you put the man in the middle of the court, and he has everything open to him. He can see who he can pass out to get out of doubles easier. It's way harder to double him in the middle of the court. Top of the key three-pointer is his ultimate look, and he's great driving out of that threat too. That's where he needs to be played, that's where he thrives, but half the time Finch fucking forgets about it and puts him on the wing where he sucks. Other thing that sucks are the sucks. This game, they were brutal, detrimental to the game of basketball. Tony Brothers especially is an absolute imbecile, calls the touchiest shit fucking ever, including 2 on Jaden McDaniels, which would set him off, and he does something extremely immature and brutal toward this organization and himself. He punches a wall after getting those 2 fouls early on, only has 9 minutes in this game, fractures his hand, and our hopes of actually doing anything more this year, which I already said was done because this team has been so fragmented and a mess, but we just had to prove it even more as we improve our standings going to the 8th seed instead of the 9, which we would have been had we lost this game. So we've got Jaden McDaniels, who I think is the second most important player to this team, fracturing his hand, punching a wall. And then we've got the starting center, the fucking goober that Tim Connolly had to get, punching teammates, and probably the number 2 person that you can't punch on this team behind Anthony Edwards and Kyle Anderson, Slow-Mo, who has just become kind of the baby face of this team and has been so crucial to us and really great. Never wanted that trade to happen, hasn't been near the value of what he was set at, and that was not an abagoo to me whatsoever, but I don't care what happens to him going forward with this team. He's not that important, but Jaden McDaniels seriously could be, so a really childish decision like this, taking yourself out, is really disappointing. So we have those 2 take themselves out of the game. Karl Anthony Towns, who was an unbelievably great offensive threat for us in a lot of stretches of this game, almost does the same thing. If you're familiar with Cat or my videos, you know how he's going to do so by emotionally idiotic fouls. He'd have 5 fouls in this game, but would have those 5 for a while, and the 4th one he picked up was so terrible. He had 3 at the moment. He's going down the court with Valanciunas kind of running towards him. He just grabs Valanciunas, pulls him back, and falls over, so obviously trying to draw the offensive foul while he's already got 3, takes himself out, and has to sit on the bench for a long time. Cat makes so many horrible decisions, easily could have fouled out of that game too. There was a moment where he missed a shot close to the rim and was trying to get the offensive rebound. When he doesn't, he just takes a huge swipe trying to hit Herb Jones I couldn't believe they didn't call the foul. Gets extremely lucky to even finish out that game. In an insanely chaotic night, let's go through some positives. Taurean Prince was a stud off the bench. So many big plays out of him. He had one of the most wonderful finishes in transition where he's just doing like cradles and windmills with the ball for a layup. Also, it hit some really big jump shots for us, and he had a really good showing where we desperately needed everything that we could get with the dysfunction and people going out of this game. Mike Conley was also a stud. The three-point shooting wasn't great tonight out of him, but he's just always making the right play, making big plays, really clutch, also forcing free throws in some smart scenarios, and he was extremely good for us. Oh boy, I just said free throws, which is going to put me on tilt because this team can't make them. They just can't. Especially from the hero of the night, Anthony Edwards, would miss 6 free throws today. His jump shot was not on. Offensively, he was kind of a mess. He had 8 turnovers in this game, including a massive one with about 15 seconds left when the Pelicans were only down 3 and we had the ball. And he probably traded and went out of bounds at once. And oh my God, he was a mess offensively, but had some important buckets, important stretches. But defensively, and basically every ancillary part of the game, he was a menace. And there was full effort from Anthony Edwards. 4 steals. 4 blocks, forced in all ways, willed that team to a victory, making the big plays down the stretch, gets a huge block on CJ McCollum with under a minute left, gets that to eventually turn into a turnover out of Ant, and then him getting an and one from Mike Conley getting a poke away and a steal because Conley is just always there in the clutch. And even when he's having off-shooting nights, he shows up defensively, and he grinds and makes the right plays too. That backcourt, I love watching. So easy to cheer for. Not something you can say with this team as a collective most nights, and the front court especially. A truly insane game. If more Pelicans players stepped up to plate in that one outside of Brandon Ingram, who was a stud, we could have been in trouble. They only make 3 threes for the entire game, shoot only 14%. So crazy that we pulled out the win there, but even with that happening, just so frustrating with having to question the dynamics with Gobert, but even more importantly, Jaden now being out, along with Nas, who was another key part of our team, and that's just so sad. Timberwolves will play the 7th seed Los Angeles Lakers in LA in the first play-in game. If we win that, we get the 7th seed. We can play the Grizzlies. If we lose, we'll have to play for the 8th seed where we would play the Nuggets. Grizzlies are going to be a much better matchup for us since they're out Steven Adams, Brandon Clark, and some other wings and front court players. However, with no Jaden, I feel pretty pessimistic about the rest of the season for the Wolves. I'll be covering the play-ins as part of this series, and I also plan on making a lot of kind of full season recaps for the team as an entire, as well as individual players and how their seasons went through kind of how we were expecting them to and how they may have grown and progressed through the season. All right, only a couple more nights of insanity for me. And who am I kidding? This is for life. All right, peace out.